Saw dudes, sorry for the hiatus. School and work has been kicking me in the teeth, so I haven't had much time to upload. To those of you still watching my videos, thank you. Your support means a lot. I know I may have been late to the party, but I wanted to create a build for Caliban who recently received a rework. In my opinion, the rework is near perfect and makes him feel like a true captain of sentient wrath. This video will cover the new abilities that came with Caliban's rework, the best builds and their variants, and how to best leverage his new kit. Enough yapping, let's get started. Just like always, we're going to start with an overview of Caliban's reworked abilities. If you know how the frame works, please use the timestamps to skip to the build sections. Caliban's passive causes him and his allies within affinity range to gain adaptive armor that builds damage resistance against the highest damage type received from enemy attacks, stacking 5% per hit up to a cap of 50%. If Caliban or his allies do not receive damage for 5 seconds, their adaptive armor loses 2% per second until fully removed. Damage over time from procs like Slash or Toxin will not contribute to nor maintain damage resistance. This bonus does not stack with adaptation. Caliban's quote-unquote second passive is his application of Tau damage and status. This damage is exclusive to Sentience and Caliban. The status effect of Tau damage is status chance vulnerability. Those affected by Tau status have their status chance vulnerability increased by 10% per stack, up to 100% at the max of 10 stacks. If you forgot or didn't know already, status chance vulnerability increases modded status chance. If you have a weapon with 10% status chance, hitting a target affected by plus 100% status chance vulnerability from 10 Tau stacks will cause your weapon to have an effective 20% status chance. His first ability is Razor Gyre, where Caliban expends 25 energy and turns into a Beyblade while dashing forward. This generates a tempest of lacerating energy spanning a radius of 12 meters around himself, while inflicting 500 Tau damage with a 25% status chance. On lifted enemies, the ability instead inflicts 1000 Tau damage. Each enemy hit will restore Caliban's health by 30, which can flow into shields and overshields when at full health, refunding 6 energy on hit. Sentient Wrath is Caliban's second ability. On cast, Caliban expends 50 energy to stomp the ground to unleash a fan of shockwaves that travels 22 meters, inflicting 2000 Tau damage with 100% status chance, raising enemies in aerial stasis and applying a 35% damage vulnerability debuff for 10 seconds. Shockwaves do not need line of sight to track and hit targets and will pass through obstacles and terrain. Caliban's third ability is Lethal Progeny. Casting the ability requires you to hold the ability key down, summoning either Conculus, Ortholis, or a Sumulist. The sentient fighters summoned by the ability are summoned at a variable rank dependent on Caliban's own Warframe rank multiplied by ability strength. Their damage multiplier starts at 2.5 times, health multiplier at 2 times, and inflict 10 times damage to non-sentient enemies. They fight along Caliban for 45 seconds at base before detonation. All sentient fighters, irrespective of type, restore the shields of Caliban and his allies within 25 meters in soft line of sight by 25 shield points per sentient fighter per second, which can overflow into overshields. This is great for general protection and survivability. The Conculus cast will summon 3 melee fighters, which occasionally perform a tornado attack, dealing 1000 Tau damage, lasting for 10 seconds with a cooldown of 4 seconds. Casting the Ortholis variant will summon 3 ranged fighters, which fire twin cannons with 100% Tau status chance. They will occasionally transform into a stationary mortar against enemies at medium to long distances to launch an arcane mortar shell that explodes with 300% Tau status chance. Finally, we have Caliban's Sumulist, which is only 1 unit on cast. After being summoned, it will open a summoning gate to continuously supply core lists which have a high threat level, attracting enemy aggro. Should a core list die, it will be resummoned by the Sumulist immediately, if the ability is still active. Caliban's final ability is Fusion Strike. On cast, Caliban expends 100 energy to cosplay as Iron Man and fire 3 beams from his hands and chest core to destroy a cardinal direction over a range of 30 meters. The beams converge into one toward the reticle, with each beam dealing 15,000 Tau damage per second with 20% status chance. During the animation, Caliban is invulnerable and immobile, but can aim the beams with reduced camera panning speed. Upon full convergence, enemies that have been directly hit by the beams detonate for 5,000 Tau damage as the streams collapse into an explosion over a 10-meter radius that inflicts Tau damage and violently pulls enemies inward while leaving behind a field of fallout that targets the same area spanning the same radius as the explosion and lingers for 15 seconds. In other words, all enemies hit by the beam and or get affected by the fallout lose 50% of their armor and shields permanently. Using this ability with Conculus from Lethal Progeny will cause them to fire their own fusion strikes as they coordinate with Caliban's fusion strike aimed at the reticle, with half damaged effectiveness. Caliban's game loop is extremely simple and new player friendly. To start, you will want to top off your energy reserves by using Razor Gyre on a group of enemies. Try to use it on groups of 5 or more to get a net gain, otherwise, the more the merrier. Next, summon your sentient fighters via Lethal Progeny. If you want to spam Fusion Strike, summon Conculus. If you want Tau status application, summon Ortholis. If you want to be truly immortal, summon the Sumulist. After that, use Sentient Wrath on incoming enemies and Fusion Strike to strip armor and shields. Use your weapons to rain hell, then rinse and repeat. This video features one main build, with the only change being the aura slot. As usual, augment the build as you see fit. The aura mod on the first build is growing power for the extra 25% ability strength buff, which is easily activated by the guaranteed Tau status application. This aura is a no-brainer unless you have another setup in mind, which we will cover later. In the Exilus slot, we have Cunning Drift for the extra ability range and slide distance. The extra range is super nice since it allows us to hit more enemies with Razor Gyre, making energy return easier and more convenient. Prime Continuity extends ability duration, which is helpful for Sentient Wrath crowd control and Lethal Progeny's fighter duration. Prime Flow increases energy reserves, which is necessary for the spam of Fusion Strike. Blind Rage increases ability strength by 99%, but does bring our ability efficiency down by 55%. This won't matter too much though, since we have his first ability refunding our energy constantly. Plus, the extra strength is a very welcome bonus, allowing us to get closer to a full defense strip on Fusion Strike. Umbral Intensify is the cherry on top, and accomplishes the same goal as Blind Rage without the downsides. Overextended increases range greatly, but does reduce our ability strength. However, the negative is offset by the two prior mods. As already stated, ability range is extremely important for Caliban's abilities. Stretch also increases range, just without the negative ability strength. Rolling Guard is our failsafe, just in case we run out of energy for Razor Gyre shield gaining, or if we get tagged with a Toxin proc. Finally, we have Equilibrium, the mod that will ensure we have constant energy and level cap content. Please use a Synth Deconstruct mod on your companion for the best results. The second build only changes the aura mod to Combat Discipline and is meant to be used with Arcane Avenger. Since Razor Gyre heals on hit, the damage taken on kill is completely mitigated and makes Arcane Avenger's activation super easy. The rest of the build remains the same and functions the same. However, we will be missing out on the 25% ability strength buff from growing power. However, you will see later that the deficit is easily fixed and not missed, depending on the other parts of the build you choose to use. Now let's cover some of the Helminth options you can choose from. From testing, Caliban does not need a Helminth ability, but he will benefit from some. The best options I found are Nourish, Roar, Breach Surge, and Expedite Suffering. If you are planning to subsume an ability onto Caliban, I suggest doing so over Sentient Wrath. Nourish is the standard ability for raising energy gains and providing viral damage to weapons. On Caliban, this is pretty nice since it makes energy returns from Razor Gyre insane and grants viral damage and viral status to the sentient fighters from Lethal Progeny. Their viral application is invaluable in high-level content. Roar is a dream for Caliban since he increases the status application of weapons through Tau status application. Roar provides a flat damage buff, but it also does double differ damaging status effects, such as electricity, toxin, heat, or slash. If you're using any of these status effects on weapons, Roar is an amazing option. Breach Surge is an alternative option for crowd control in the place of Sentient Wrath. The crowd control is great, and the sparks created add another level of lethality to Caliban's kit. The damage vulnerability of Sentient Wrath won't be missed since the sparks can easily reach in the millions of damage and are only amplified by the defense drip from Fusion Strike. And finally, we have Expedite Suffering, a somewhat niche option. Enemies hit by Expedite Suffering while debuffed with an active slash or toxin status effect will instantly receive the full damage from all damage ticks of the procs multiplied by 1 time, which can be increased by ability strength. If you plan to use a slash-based or toxin-based weapon, this option can be very nice. Let's cover the arcanes. The suggestions for this section are Arcane Avenger, Energize, Ice Storm, Molt Augmented, and Molt Efficiency. First, Arcane Avenger is meant to be used with the Combat Discipline build variant, but it can also be used with the Growing Power variant. In extended missions, you will constantly be killing enemies and taking damage to your health, essentially guaranteeing the constant flat 45% crit buff. Razor Gyre heals on hit, making the health drain a negligible downside. I don't like recommending Arcane Energize, but it is an option you can consider if you still struggle with energy economy. If you are having issues refunding energy off of groups or are going into content that is known to drain your energy, then this can be an Arcane in your build. Arcane Ice Storm is something that Caliban benefits greatly from, but it does require the use of a cold-based weapon. All of Caliban's abilities benefit from ability strength, and most benefit from ability duration, making this a great option depending on your weapon of choice. Caliban's amplification of status application makes freezing enemies much faster and makes the proc requirement much easier to handle. Molt Augmented is a near mandatory arcane if you plan to go into endurance missions. The bonus 60% ability strength at 250 kills is perfect for offsetting the negative from overextended and buffs all of his abilities. Lastly, we have Molt Efficiency. Since Caliban can easily refresh his shields with a single cast of Roulette, keeping this Arcane's bonus active is incredibly easy. Lethal Progeny will see the most benefit from the ability duration buff, so if you want to have minions fighting for you all the time, try it out. At the moment, I run Arcane Energize and Molt Augmented, which is featured in the gameplay footage. However, after some tinkering, I have landed on Arcane Avenger and Molt Augmented. I really love the flat crit chance buff and think it provides a much needed damage buff over the other option. If you have a weapon-specific arcane, feel free to use it, this is just my preference. I know I sound like a broken record, but Madurai is the best focus school for Caliban. He doesn't need the energy regen provided by Xeneric, nor the survivability bonuses of Vazarin. Power Transfer provides a welcome bonus to casting speed, which is incredibly nice for the slow animation of Fusion Strike. In general, casting speed is nice to reduce vulnerability while spamming abilities. Sling Strength grants an extra 40% ability strength, allowing us to hit 200% total faster for full strip with Fusion Strike. It's also helpful for buffing Lethal Progeny prior to casting, making all sentient fighters more potent. Void Strike and Void Fuel are nice to have. Void Strike offers a massive damage bonus to weapons, and Void Fuel increases weapon efficiency by 40%. Since Caliban buffs status weapons so much, we can leverage these bonuses a lot more than other frames. Of course, if you're going to Endurance Void Cascade, these bonuses are a must. Okay, hang in there, we're getting close to the end. For Archon shards, I went with a fairly funky setup. I have 4 Crimson Archon shards, 2 of which are for primary status chance, and the other 2 for ability strength. The final shard slot is delegated for a mandatory Amber casting speed shard. As you're probably tired of hearing, Caliban greatly increases status-based weapon performance, so I decided to lean into that. With 2 Tauforge Crimson shards, we have an effective 75% primary weapon status chance buff. This is massive for so many weapons, and allows them to stack procs incredibly quick. Combined with Tau applications, they become literal blenders. The extra strength provided by the other shards is a nice bonus, and buffs all of Caliban's abilities. All we have to do now is cover some of the weapon options afforded to Caliban. Naturally, there are way more than I'm covering. These are just my preferences. If you have suggestions, please leave them in the comments. The primaries I prefer to run on Caliban are Boar Prime Incarnon and Phantasma Prime. Besides both being shotguns, these weapons are both beams, which are well known for being status monsters. I build my Boar Prime Incarnon for blast damage, since Caliban can buff the 10 proc AoE effect much more than other frames. On Phantasma, I use a heat-based build that microwaves enemies. The secondaries I chose are Kuva Nukor and Tenet Cycron. I run Kuva Nukor most of the time because of the utterly ridiculous critical multiplier, which I leverage with Arcane Avenger. Regardless, both of these weapons are heat monsters. I run a Magnetic Progenitor on both for primary reasons and extra utility against shielded enemies. My favorite melee weapons are Cronin Prime and Praetos. Both are slash monsters with good range and buff parkour speed, which is nice for blazing through missions. Admittedly, almost any status-based melee weapon can take up the slot, but I just like Tonfas. And that is it for Caliban and his rework. Here's some brief thoughts. I think his rework was a complete success. All the abilities on this frame are strong, represent the theme of the frame well, and just feel good to use. Usually frames come with one ability that is a clear subsume slot, but that isn't the case for the new Caliban, which is a massive positive to me. This feels a lot like Gauss, who plays just fine without a Helminth. I've had a blast playtesting Caliban and pushing his limits. In actuality, his limits are really hard to gauge since I haven't had many issues in harder content other than my own spazzing out. 10 out of 10 DE, I love to see this type of ingenuity. With that being said, I'm done yapping. Sorry for the delayed yap session, but Xaku Prime is coming soon and I'll be ready much sooner. As always, thank you all for watching and happy farming. Stay safe.